What is up, YouTube? Dottz Gaming here, and today I'm bringing you guys the next installment of my leveling build series. Now, for those of you who are new to these leveling builds are not builds in the traditional sense. In my opinion, traditional leveling builds are kind of a waste of time. You're constantly replacing your gear, so why just keep crafting gear over and over again? And plus, as a newer player, you probably don't even have access to a crafter to constantly make you gear. And you shouldn't be relegating yourself to a set of skills and instead experimenting and learning while you play. Most importantly, you really want to just spend your leveling process enjoying the game, having fun, and learning. But a static leveling build and a static leveling progression can take that process and that experience away from a new player. So this video is instead a framework to follow, showing you some of the most commonly used abilities for each class and role, with some of my own flair thrown in, thus allowing you to pick and choose from a list and mix and match how you like. This will not only allow you guys to personally experiment with different abilities as you level up, but come endgame, you'll not only have all, if not most of the most commonly used abilities leveled up and morphed, but you'll also know which ones that you personally like, and that which ones work best for you. Now, I'm going to be covering all roles in this guide: Magicka and Stamina DPS, tanks, and healers. A disclaimer before I start though, this is just my opinion. I'm not saying I'm the end-all be-all and that you have to follow this to a T. If you don't like something, go ahead and change it. Remember though, the goal of these guides and these frameworks is to make the leveling process easier and set you up and prep you for endgame. You may need to respec come endgame if you decide to go in a more PvE or PvP direction or go with a specific build, but it isn't what you should be worrying about right now, nor do you need to worry about that until you are champion point 160. The goal of this guide though, like I said, is to just assist you in the leveling process and help you prep your skill trees and your abilities to be used in a proper setup of your own or someone else's design come the end of the game. But with the intro out of the way, we are going to move into our next class, and that is the Sorcerer. Sorcerers are the conjurers of Daedra and controllers of lightning, boasting massive amounts of damage and mobility. Now, even though Sorcs are primarily used as damage dealers, they can still fit into the tank and healer roles with a very, very unique and interesting playstyle. Sorcs make a great first character due to having the option of having a pet while you level, and also having strong damage shields, both of which can help you end your adventures. When built correctly, easy and effective builds can be made, which will make your leveling process easier. So displayed right now are the timestamps for the different sections, the different roles, so you can skip to whichever section applies to you, or if you want to know all the different ways to build your sorcerer, you can watch the entire guide all the way through. Moving into Magicka Sorcerer DPS, for our race choices, we have High Elf, Breton, Dark Elf, and Argonian. In my opinion, for the Sorcerer, High Elf is going to be your number one, simply because of the fact that the Magicka Sorcerer deals mainly lightning damage, and High Elf gives you the biggest bonus to lightning damage, so High Elf is just going to be your best bet. In my opinion, Breton would probably come second, and then I don't know if Dark Elf or Argonian would come third. I'd have to imagine Dark Elf probably come third and Argonian last for at least the PvE end of things, and then for PvP your number 1 and 2 options are probably High Elf and Argonian. So you can pick and choose from these race choices as you like, but for general play, playing a Mag Sorc, High Elf is definitely the recommended race. In terms of your gear, you're looking at 5 light, 1 medium, 1 heavy. Due to the fact that you are a Magicka Sorcerer, you will benefit most from the light armor passives. And then in terms of your weapons, you're looking at dual destruction staffs or destruction staff, restoration staff if you're eventually looking to PvP. In terms of attributes, we are going all into Magicka. We're going all into Magicka because we are a Magicka Sorcerer. Our abilities scale and get stronger with Magicka, so we want to pump all of our points into that resource. In terms of vampire versus werewolf versus mortal, we are going with the vampire because the benefits that you gain from being a vampire outweigh the drawbacks, mainly through the recovery that you gain from being a vampire is just so worth grabbing. In terms of our Mundus, we are looking at the Apprentice Mundus. The Apprentice Mundus is currently the Mundus stone that is parsing the highest, so I would recommend grabbing that as your Mundus stone, but your second option would be Lover, but I still believe that Apprentice is the best one to use. In terms of potions and food, we are looking at Magicka potions to just keep your resources topped off, and just throughout your adventures make sure that you have as much of your resource available to cast spells and do things with, so you want to be chugging these on command. In terms of food, not mandatory, but if you can find some, try to get stuff that increases either your health, your Magicka, and or your Magicka recovery. If you can't find something that does those specific resources, remember, having some food on is better than having no food on. Now moving into the abilities, before I actually get into the list, kind of a little blurb about them, you want to do your best to have one ability from each class tree on both your front and back bar. When you gain experience, whether it be from killing monsters or completing quests, the abilities on your active bar are the ones that gain experience as well as their respective skill lines. Another cool trick is that you have abilities on a skill bar that you want to level up. You can switch to that bar when handing in a quest or completing a dungeon to give them and their skill lines a surge of experience. Now keep in mind though, that is if that's how that skill line gains experience. Some skill lines like the Mages Guild gain experience, the skill line itself, through lore books. So getting experience on, let's say, Inner Light, for example, is not going to help the Mages Guild skill line level up. So just make sure that you know how each of your skill lines levels up. Simply hovering your mouse over the skill line will alert you to that. Now you're going to notice that I do frequently recommend the first skill of a skill tree as a choice, just to obviously help with you getting that skill line started for your class skill lines. If you want to level another weapon or skill tree without using that weapon or skill, simply placing a skill from that tree on your ability bar will help it gain experience when you gain experience with that bar active. You don't actually have to use the ability. Now, moving into our ability list for the Magicka Sorcerer, we have Daedric Summoning. We're looking at Summon Unstable Familiar, which you want to morph into Summon Volatile Familiar. We also have Daedric Curse, which you're going to want to morph into Daedric Prey. Conjured Ward, you can take either morph. I've seen both used. And then for Bound Armor, you're going to want to morph that into Bound Aegis. For Dark Magic, we have Crystal Shard, which you're going to want to morph into the Deadly Crystal Fragments, and we have Dark Exchange, which you're going to want to morph into Dark Conversion. From Stormcalling, we have Mage's Fury, which you're going to want to morph into Mage's Wrath, and then Lightning Splash, which you're going to want to morph into Liquid Lightning. From the Mages Guild, we have Mage Light, which you're going to want to morph into Inner Light. From the Light Armor line, we have Annulment, which you're going to want to morph into Harness Magicka. From the Destro Staff, we have Force Shock, which you're going to want to morph into Force Pulse. Destructive Touch, which you're going to want to morph into Destructive Reach, and Wall of Elements, which you're going to want to morph into Elemental Blockade. Now, if you're going to be doing some PvP, or you want to fill out your ability bars with some abilities that will be good for a PvP environment, and maybe it's something you can eventually do, we have some skill lines mainly from the Stormcalling skill line. From Stormcalling, we have Bolt Escape, which you're going to want to morph into Streak. We have Lightning Form, which you're going to want to morph into Boundless Storm, and Surge, which you're going to want to morph into Power Surge. And then finally, if you do go PvP, you're also going to be using a Restoration Staff, and I would recommend mainly looking at Steadfast Ward, which you're going to want to morph into Healing Ward. In terms of our ultimates, we have from the Daedric Summoning skill line, Summon Storm Atronach, which will be morphed into Greater Storm Atronach. From Stormcalling, we have Overload, which you're going to want to morph into Energy Overload. Destruction Staff, we have Elemental Storm, which you're going to want to morph into Elemental Rage. And then Meteor from the Mages Guild, which you're going to want to morph into Shooting Star. In terms of our passives, you want all of your class passives, so Daedric Summoning, Dark Magic, and Stormcalling. You want your Racial passives, your Light Armor passives, your Destruction Staff passives, and your Restoration Staff passives if you're going to be PvPing. Vampirism passives, except for Savage Feeding and Blood Ritual. Medicinal use from Alchemy. Mages Guild, Banish the Wicked from the Fighters Guild, Undaunted, and then you want your medium and heavy armor passives that do not require you to be wearing 5 pieces of that gear type. In terms of our rotation, you want to use any abilities that give you a buff first so that they make any subsequent abilities stronger or help you stay alive longer. You also optimally would like to use any damage over time or AoE spells in your build first, and weave a light attack in between each of those so that those can tick while you go through the rest of your rotation. You should also have one spammable ability in your builds so that when all your dots are up and you don't need to buff yourself, that you can just use and cast that. And then also you want to use any CC, shields, and heals as needed, and you want to optimally make sure that you have a few of those at your disposal when making a build for general play. Moving into Stamina Sorcerer, for our race choices, we have Redguard, Khajiit, Wood Elf, or Orc. I believe technically the best races for Stamina Warden, I want to say, are Redguard and Orc. I believe those are the best two. Khajiit is still good, Wood Elf is still good, still usable, but I believe that Redguard and Orc take the number 1 and 2 spots respectively for the Stamina Sorcerer, so that is your list to choose from. In terms of our gear, we are looking at 1 light, 5 medium, and 1 heavy, utilizing dual wield and bow. And if you're eventually going to be focusing mainly on PvP, you could go 2H instead of dual wielding. And you also have the option of utilizing one hand and shield for a PvP build. I have seen those very commonly, so that is something else you could also keep in mind. In terms of our attributes, we are going to want to go full on into stamina. We want a bigger stamina pool just to, allow us to use more spells and do more things, and also having a larger stamina pool is going to make our stamina damage dealing abilities deal more damage since they scale with their resource. In terms of vampire versus werewolf versus mortal, you're going to want to go vampire. Again, the benefits you gain from being a vampire outweigh the drawbacks. The extra recovery you get from being a vampire is just too good to pass up. In terms of our Mundus stone, we are looking at the warrior. Warrior is parsing the highest out of all the Mundus stones for stamina. It is giving you weapon damage, so that's going to be the one you want to go with. Lover is another optional choice, but I believe warrior is the best. In terms of potions and food, we are looking at stamina potions, again, to keep our resources maintained. And then in terms of food, while not mandatory, if you can find some, try to get stuff that increases either your health, stamina, or stamina recovery. If you can't find something that does one of those three, just use any food that you find, because remember, any food is better than no food. In terms of our abilities, you want to do your best to have one ability from each class tree slotted on both your front and back bar. When you gain experience, whether it be from killing monsters or completing quests, the abilities on your active bar are the ones that gain experience, as well as their respective skill lines. Another cool trick is that if you have abilities on a skill bar that you want to level up, you can switch that bar when handing in a quest or completing a dungeon to give them and their skill lines a surge of experience. Do keep in mind that some skill trees, such as the Mages Guild, gain experience through other avenues, such as collecting lore books, so when you're in-game, hover your mouse over your skill tree so that you understand how they gain experience respectively. Now you're going to notice that when I go through the skill loadout, I do recommend the first skill of each skill tree for at least the class trees as a choice, mainly just to help you get those skill lines started leveling so that you can get to the abilities you really want to use. If you want to level another weapon or a skill tree without actually using those weapons or skills, simply placing a skill from that tree on your ability bar will help it gain experience when you gain experience on that bar. You don't actually have to use the ability itself. Moving into the ability list, though, we have from Daedric Summoning, Summon Unstable Familiar, which you're going to want to morph into Summon Unstable Clan Fear. In terms of Daedric Summoning, we are looking at Bound Armor, which you're going to want to morph into Bound Armaments. From Dark Magic, we have Crystal Shard, which you're going to want to morph into Crystal Fragments, and Dark Exchange, which you're going to want to morph into Dark Deal. From Storm Calling, we have Mage's Fury, which you're going to want to morph into Endless Fury. The reason I chose that morph is because you really won't be using that spell all that much, and it is mainly as a means to get Lightning Form, because that's what you really want from Storm Calling, and I chose the Restore Magicka morph just to help you keep your resources maintained. It's not going to be dealing a crap ton of damage anyway, so I feel like it would be better to just keep your Magicka pool sustained anyway. Now, the main thing we want from Storm Calling, Lightning Form, which you're going to want to morph into Hurricane, and then Surge, which you're going to want to morph into Critical Surge. From the Fighters Guild, we have Trap Beast, which you're going to want to morph into Rearming Trap, and from Medium Armor, we have Evasion, and you can take either morph depending on if you're doing PvP or PvE. From the Bow, we have Poison Arrow, which you're going to want to morph into Poison Injection, and Volley, which you're going to want to morph into Endless Hail. From Dual Wield, we have Twin Slashes. You can take either morph. We also have Hidden Blade, which you want to morph into Shrouded Daggers, and Blade Cloak, which you're going to want to morph into Deadly Cloak. From the Assault skill line, we have Vigor, which you're going to want to morph into Resolving Vigor, and Caltrops, which you're going to want to morph into Razor Caltrops. If you're also going to be PvPing, or if you want to help fill out your skill bars, I have some other abilities that I could recommend to you. Now, this is if you do plan on using a two-hander or a one-handed shield and you want to know which abilities are best, this is what I'd recommend. From Storm Calling, you want to grab Bolt Escape, but you're going to want to morph into Streak. It's a very, very good ability and mandatory for all sorts in PvP. From the two-handed skill line, you're going to want Critical Charge, which you're going to want to morph into Critical Rush. You want Reverse Slash, which you're going to want to morph into Reverse Slice, and Momentum, which you're going to want to morph into Rally. From the one-handed shield, you're going to want to grab Puncture, and you can take either morph. I've seen both used, so pick and choose as you'd like. And then also you want Power Bash, which you're going to want to morph into Reverberating Bash. In terms of our ultimates, we have the Dawnbreaker from the Fighters Guild, and you can take either morph. I've seen both used, so take whichever one you prefer. We have Daedric Summoning. You want to grab Summon Storm Atronach, which you're going to want to morph into Greater Storm Atronach. We have Overload from Storm Calling, which you're going to want to morph into Energy Overload. And then from our bow, we have Rapid Fire, which you're going to want to morph into Ballista. In terms of our passives, we have Daedric Summoning, Dark Magic, Storm Calling, Racial, Medium Armor, Dual Wield, or 2H and or one-handed shield if you plan on going the PvP route, Bow, Vampirism passives, except for Savage Feeding and Blood Ritual, Medicinal Use from Alchemy, Fighters Guild, Undaunted, and then eventually your light and heavy armor passives that do not require you to wear 5 pieces of gear. In terms of our rotation, you want to try to use any abilities that give you a buff first, so that they make any abilities used afterwards stronger and help you stay alive longer. You also want to optimally use any dots or AoE in your build first, so use those with weaving a light attack in between each of those to optimize your damage. After that, you can move into your spammable ability. You want to try to have one in your build to use when all of your dots are up and you don't need to buff yourself. You also want to use any CC, shields, and heals as needed, and you optimally want to make sure that you have a few of these at your disposal when making a build for general playing. Now, moving into the Sorcerer tank, we have for our race choices Imperial, Argonian, Orc, and Nord. I would say, I believe right now, Argonian and Orc are probably your best choices for a Sorcerer tank, with Imperial following in third and Nord in last, so just keep that in mind when choosing your races. In terms of, well, Nord not in last, but Nord in last of these four. In terms of our gear, we are looking at 1 light, 1 medium, 5 heavy. You know, want as much resistance as possible as a tank while using double sword and board. Now, I've seen Restoration Staff as an option while tanking, but I truly believe that double S&B is what you want to do when playing a tank, especially as a new tank. In terms of our attributes, we're putting all of our points into health, again, to make us as tanky and beefy as possible. Moving into Vampire versus Werewolf versus Mortal, you're going to want to go Vampire, even though you take the extra fire damage, mainly because the recovery you gain for being a Vampire is just so good, it literally outweighs all of the negative benefits. Also, Undeath is going to be very helpful as a Vampire. You take less damage as your health gets lower. Very useful for a tank. In terms of our Mundus, we are looking at the Lord, the one that gives max health, again, just to help us beef up and be even tankier. In terms of potions and food, you can really use any potion that you want. Health potion to help maintain your health, or a stamina or Magicka potion to help maintain your resources. Now, food, while not mandatory, if you do find some, try to get stuff that increases your stats, so your health, Magicka, or stamina. If you just find some recovery food or any other food, and you don't have the specific food that you need, go ahead and use it. Any food and any extra buffs that you can get are better than no additional buffs. In terms of our abilities, you do want to do your best to have one ability from each class tree on both your front and back bar. When you do gain experience, whether it be from killing monsters or doing quests, the abilities on your active bar are the ones that gain experience as well as their respective skill lines. And another cool trick though is that if you do have abilities on a skill bar that you want to level up, you can switch to that bar when handing in a quest or completing a dungeon to give them and their skill lines a massive surge of experience. Do keep in mind though that some skill lines like the Mages Guild gain experience through other ways, such as collecting lore books for the Mages Guild. So just keep that in mind and hover over your skill tree so that you fully understand how they gain experience. Now, you are going to notice that when I do recommend the skill lines here, the abilities from the skill trees here, I do recommend the first skill from the class trees as a choice, just to obviously help you get started with getting that skill line leveled. If you do want to level another weapon or skill tree without actually using it, simply placing a skill from that tree on your ability bar will help it gain experience while you gain experience on that bar. You don't actually have to use it. Moving into our ability selection, we have from Daedric Summoning, Summon Unstable Familiar, which you're going to want to morph into Summon Unstable Clan Fear. We have Daedric Summoning, you want Conjured Ward, you can take either morph, I have seen both used. From Bound Armor, you want to grab Bound Aegis. From Dark Magic, we have Crystal Shard, which you're going to want to morph into Crystal Fragments. We have Encase, which you're going to want to morph into Restraining Prison, and Dark Exchange, which you're going to want to morph into Dark Deal. From Stormcalling, we have Mage's Fury, which you're going to want to morph into Mage's Wrath, and Lightning Form, which you're going to want to morph into Boundless Storm. From One-Handed Shield, we have Puncture, which you're going to want to morph into Pierce Armor, Low Slash, which you're going to want to morph into Heroic Slash, and Defensive Posture, which you're going to want to morph into Absorb Magic. From Undaunted, we have Inner Fire, which you're going to want to morph into Inner Rage, and Bone Shield, which you're going to want to morph into Bone Surge. In terms of our ultimate selections, we have from the One-Handed Shield skill line, we have Shield Wall, which you're going to want to morph into Shield Discipline. From Assault, we have Warhorn. You could take either morph. I have seen both used, so you can take which one you prefer. From Daedric Summoning, we have Summon Storm Atronach, which you're going to want to morph into Greater Storm Atronach. And then from Stormcalling, we have Overload, which you're going to want to morph into Energy Overload. In terms of our passives, we have Daedric Summoning, Dark Magic, Stormcalling, Racial, Heavy Armor, One-Handed Shield with the optional Restoration Staff. Again, I'd recommend going double sword and board, but if you want to go Resto Staff, grab those passives. And then in terms of skills from Resto Staff, I would recommend looking at stuff like Healing, Ward, and Mutagen. Those are the skills that you're going to want to optimally look at. We have Vampirism passives except for Savage Feeding and Blood Ritual, Medicinal Use from Alchemy, Banish the Wicked from Fighters Guild, Undaunted. And then once these abilities once all these passives are acquired, you're going to want to get your passives for your light and medium armor skill lines that don't require you to wear 5 pieces of that gear type. We do not have a rotation as a tank. You just use things in your kit as you need them. Now finally we get to the Sorcerer Healer, and we have two choices for our race here. We have Breton or Argonian. I believe that Argonian is the best for healers, but Breton is still a very, very solid choice. But Argonian, I think, is the best at the current moment in time. In terms of our gear, we are looking at 5 light, 1 medium, 1 heavy, while using a Lightning Destruction Staff and a Restoration Staff. The Lightning Destruction Staff is extremely important because it applies off balance to your enemies, which is a very, very key debuff for group DPS. Mainly because of the fact that there is a champion point, when you get to the champion point trees, there is a certain tree that when you have a certain amount of points into it, you end up dealing 10% more damage to off-balance enemies, and then certain party members like Magicka DKs really heavily benefit from having off-balance in a group, so it is just a very, very good buff to have, or debuff, excuse me, to have, so that is why you want to run the Lightning Destruction Staff. In terms of our attributes, we go all into Magicka to not only increase our resource pool, but increase the effectiveness of our heals and damaging spells, because they scale with Magicka, so we want a bigger Magicka pool. In terms of Vampire versus Werewolf versus Mortal, we are going with the Vampire, again, because the benefits of being a vampire outweigh the negatives, that the extra recovery that you get is just too good to pass up. In terms of Mundus, speaking of recovery, we are grabbing the Atronach just to get as much recovery as we can, because healers really like having Magicka recovery. It is one of their favorite stats to grab. In terms of potions and food, we are looking at Magicka potions to help keep our resources maintained. And then food, while not mandatory, if you can find some, try to get stuff that increases your health, Magicka, and or Magicka recovery. If you cannot find that type of food, though, do remember that any food is better than no food. In terms of our abilities, you do want to do your best to have one ability from each class tree on both your front and back bar. When you gain experience, whether it be from killing monsters or completing quests, the abilities on your active bar are the ones that gain experience as well as their respective skill lines. Another cool trick is that if you have abilities on a skill bar that you want to level up, you can switch to that bar when handing in a quest or completing a dungeon to give them and their skill lines a surge of experience. You're going to notice, though, that I do frequently recommend the first skill of the class skill trees as a choice, just to obviously help you get started with getting those skill lines leveled. Do keep in mind, though, guys, some skill lines do level a little bit differently than others. While the class and the weapon skill lines do level from just gaining experience while utilizing those things, stuff like the Mages Guild requires you to get lore books, stuff like the Fighters Guild requires you to kill Daedra, so just keep that in mind when you're trying to level your different skill lines. If you want to level another weapon or skill tree, though, without actually using a weapon or skill from that tree, simply placing a skill from the tree on your ability bar will help it and its corresponding skill tree gain experience when you gain experience on that bar. You don't actually have to utilize or use the ability. In terms of our ability list, from Daedric Summoning, we have Summon Unstable Familiar, which you're going to want to morph into Summon Clan Fear. In terms of Daedric Summoning, we have Conjured Ward, which you're going to want to morph into Empowered Ward. We have Summon Winged Twilight, which you're going to want to morph into Twilight Matriarch. From Daedric Summoning, we have Bound Armor, which you're going to want to morph into Bound Aegis. From Dark Magic, we have Crystal Shard, which you're going to want to morph into Crystal Fragments. Dark Exchange, which you're going to want to morph into Dark Conversion. From Stormcalling, we have Mage's Fury, which you're going to want to morph into Mage's Wrath. From Mage's Guild, we have Mage Light, which you're going to want to morph into Inner Light. From the Destruction Staff, we have Wall of Elements, which will be morphed into Elemental Blockade. Weakness of Elements, Weakness to Elements, which will be morphed into Elemental Drain. From the Restoration Staff, we have Grand Healing, which you want to morph into Healing Springs. Regeneration, which you're going to want to morph into Mutagen. Blessing of Protection, which will be morphed into Combat Prayer. And Steadfast Ward, which you can take either morph. In terms of from our support line, we want to grab Purge, which you can morph into Efficient Purge. Light Armor, we have Annulment, which you're going to want to morph into Harness Magicka, and Necrotic Orb from Undaunted, which you're going to want to morph into Energy Orb. In terms of our ultimates, we have Warhorn from the Assault skill line, which you're going to want to morph into Aggressive Warhorn. From the Restoration Staff, we have Panacea, I think is how it's pronounced, which you're going to want to morph into Light's Champion. Daedric Summoning, we have Summon Storm Atronach, which you're going to want to morph into Greater Storm Atronach, and then Overload from Stormcalling, which you're going to want to morph into Energy Overload. In terms of our passives, we have Daedric Summoning, Dark Magic, Stormcalling, Racial, Light Armor, Destruction Staff, Restoration Staff, Vampirism, except for Savage Reading and Blood Ritual, Medicinal Use from Alchemy, the Mages Guild, Banish the Wicked from Fighters Guild, Support if Purge is slotted, Undaunted, and then eventually your non-5-piece requiring medium and heavy armor passives. And then in terms of a rotation, healers do not have a set rotation like DPS. You just want to use things in your kit as you need them. So that is it, guys, for the Sorcerer Leveling build. I know that this one in particular has been heavily awaited, so I did a lot of time putting research into this one. I asked a couple Sorcerer players I do know about some of the ability lists and got the okay from them. So you guys should know that you are getting some of the best information here. I really hope that these guys have been helping you out. I have not seen really any good updated leveling builds or frameworks out there. There's nothing out there that's like this, so I really just wanted to create a great resource that all new players or anyone leveling a new class that they're unfamiliar with could use and could follow, so they know, no matter what their role, no matter what their class, that these are some of the best abilities that you can use for that class, and that this is the most optimal way to level up, to prepare your character for endgame. So I hope you guys have been enjoying this series. We have just the Warden left next week, and then after that, the Leveling Build series will be concluded. But if you guys do like this series, if you like this video and have found it all helpful, I would appreciate if you left a like on the video, and if you have been enjoying this content and would like to see some more, as well as some pretty awesome streams, if I must say so myself, you just feel free to hit that subscribe button, as well as hit the bell next to it to keep notifications on for when I do things here on YouTube. So I appreciate you guys stopping by and watching my guide and making it all the way to the end. Thanks again for watching. I'm Dottz Gaming, and I will see you all next time.